Yo.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Belfast Bapcast. Today's guest isn't your average health expert. He's not parroting the same stuff that the NHS are trying to put out there. He's qualified as a physio back in 1988, retrained as a naturopath in 1999, and for the past 26 years he's been digging into vaccines, immunity, chronic illness properly and not performatively. So he specialised in cardiovascular health from 2011, but when the government shut the doors in 2020, he didn't sit back. He launched the Healthy Gut Guru so he could continue treating his patients, minus the masks and minus any apologies. So he started calling COVID out in April 2020, gave his first speech in Derry with the Silent London that summer and kept showing up at rallies across the country, saying what most doctors were too cowardly to say. In 2023, they fined him £430 for it. We're dying to stand up and speak out. But since then, he has been treating vaccine damaged patients with autoimmune conditions, heart issues, gut problems, and even cancer. The stuff that the mainstream won't touch. So he's not here to make friends. He's not here to make apologies. He's here to get people better, and some straight talking today, guys, and an interesting chat ahead. So, question one, David, just a wee bit about your background. So, you graduated as a physio in 1988. So, what drew you away from mainstream physiotherapy and into naturopath?
When I studied physio, I really enjoyed my first year studying physio. It was very sort of academic, and I put all my energy into it. And I did really well in my first year, into my first year exams. And then when I went into second year, I just found physio I didn't think was for me because it's all hospital based, blah blah blah. And the second thing was I had started bodybuilding when I was 17, 18, so I was more interested in bodybuilding than I was in studying.
Yes.
So I was going to give up my physio training halfway through, and I was persuaded by friends and family to stay on with the idea that if I qualified as a physio, if I didn't like it, I could go and retrain. So when I qualified in 1988, there were very few jobs in Northern Ireland. So I, like many of my fellow students, we ended up moving to places like Wales or England, where there was an abundance of jobs. And I started working, and it was okay. It paid the wages. After 3 years in the NHS, I moved to Brighton, and I worked in a private physio clinic there for 2 years. You know, I was given all sorts of promises, but the time I moved there, which was about 1990, 91, that was one of the times when the economy went through the floor. So less and less people were paying for private stuff. So I was promised, this high paying job, and suddenly it wasn't there. So eventually my parents said, look, why don't you come home and we'll fund you to set up a physio clinic. So I came home, I set up a physio clinic in Cookstown. And at the same time, I also got a part-time job with Courtown Rugby Club as their physio. So I had a clinic in Cookstown, a clinic at the rugby club, and then treating rugby players.
And how long did you continue in the physio field for?
So my son was born in 2001. He's 24 this year. And as soon as he was born, I gave up the physio at the rugby club because I wanted to spend more time with him. Now, the day that he was born 12:30 in the morning, and it's on the 20th of October, 2001. I came home from the hospital, and I went into my clinic to see if there's any appointments, people looking at appointments. And the phone, there was about 100 messages on the phone. Now, 2 or 3 months previous to that, the Irish Times had come up, and they were doing an article on me. So they came up, the journalist spent a few hours. I was teaching her about what I was doing in terms of naturopathy. So I was trained as a naturopath, practicing naturopathy with my physio patients. So she came up, did an interview with me, and then she said, I send a photographer up. So I thought, brilliant, he'll come out and take a photograph of me. Oh no, he came up and he turned to my sort of consultation room into the studio. So I'm running between physio patients, and he's taking photographs like this. And then the day that my son is born, they didn't let me know. This magazine, the Irish Irish Times came out, a double cover color spread in the centre of the Irish Times magazine of me in this sort of dark reddish light holding a syringe up. I looked like Doctor Doom or Doctor Death. Brilliant. I don't even know. I should have a copy of it somewhere.
So you were saying along, you qualified obviously as a physiotherapist. When did you start the naturopath?
So I started studying in 1999 with a college called the College of Naturopathic Medicine. It was their first year launching naturopathic medicine in Ireland. Okay. And I was very interested in nutrition, obviously, from my bodybuilding days. Yeah. Now, the first weekend I went along to the training, they had it in the city hospital. They had some highfalutin professor in talking about stuff that was completely over our heads. And I come home to my wife and I said, I do this? I said, this is just... So then she says, go back again to the next month. So it was once a month. And the next month I went along there and we had an eccentric professor called Professor Kirkman. Okay. He had a beard going down to here. He looked like he was in his... It's
always a good start, isn't it?
Yeah, yep. He looked like he was in his 70s. And he had the most amazing knowledge about nutrition and health. And we started learning stuff. We're talking about probiotics 26 years ago, which has really only become a buzzword in the last 10 years or so. Yeah. We were talking about this stuff called argan oil that the Berbers used. It was one of the things that was meant to give them their strength and endurance as a conquering warrior nation. We were learning all this stuff that nobody had ever heard of before. And the funny thing was, he said, the best way to deal with constipation, 2 cigarettes, a couple of 12 cups of black coffee. So we used to go out to the front of the hospital at lunchtime, and he would be standing out there eating his white bread sandwich on a fag. But this man had the most amazing knowledge, and he was actually an allopathically trained doctor and professor, but he also was involved in writing many nutrition courses, and he actually got kicked out of the medical debate. But he got kicked out because he was helping people with cancer. Okay. And of course, I went against the grain. Anybody who puts their head above the medical parapet, they want to cut you down.
Seems to be the case in a lot of industries, really. And what you were saying there, I seem to find that most people have like one figure that sticks out in their life that made an impact, and obviously for you, that professor is.
Well, not only that, that professor was a friend of another guy called Professor Laurent Bonnot, and my ex-wife at the time had got problems, and we took her over to Brighton, where she's from originally, to meet Laurent, and between the two of us and some studying, we put together a nutrition plan and treatments, and this is going back 26 years ago. I was only really at the beginning of my journey and quest for knowledge and understanding of health, which I'm still on, and between the two of us, we managed to get her sorted, and then he became one of my best friends. And then a number of years ago, I don't know why, we lost communication. So I set up the naturopathic clinic alongside my physio clinic. My ex-wife she's from Brighton, so she didn't like living in Northern Ireland. So after 3 or 4 years, she persuaded us that we should move to Spain to live. Okay. So we sold up a lovely 3,000 square foot house. We sold it up. We went to Spain, and life went to shit. She left after a year. I ended up with addiction issues, very serious addiction issues.
What were those addictions, if you don't mind me asking?
It was IV cocaine. And if you want to kill yourself, go to Spain and develop an intravenous cocaine habit.
Yeah, that's.
Now, I have not told many people about this because it's a part of my past that I still struggle with at times. But I do think that out of hitting rock bottom, and I mean rock bottom. There's that Christian prayer about footsteps in the sand. I know I was carried.
The whole way. Yeah.
I know there was times that I should not have been here, and I know that I was carried. And I always used to say, well, there's a reason for this. Why did I go through this? The one thing that really gets to me is when I walk through the streets of any city and I see drug addicts in the street or homeless people, my heart just breaks my heart.
Well, it's getting worse and worse, and especially in Northern Ireland. You know, the level of drug addiction. You know, used to be seeing people smacked off their head or whatever, but now it's like full on heroin addictions, like synthetic cannabinoids, all sorts of mad drugs. And
like we came back from Prague there a month ago, and we're surprised how many homeless people are. Like we were talking to a girl who worked in Prague, and she was the Russian girl working in the Italian restaurant, and we were asking, well, what sort of salary you're in? €3 an hour she was getting paid. But she said the restaurant's really good because they let us keep all our tips, and actually people tip quite well.
Okay.
But one of the things that stood out was there's this homeless guy, and I don't know whether have you ever heard of that drug crocodile?
Yes,
Yeah.
crocodile.
Yeah, crocodile.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was that or whether it was meth or what it was, but
It eats the flesh.
this guy, his whole skin, he was constantly just scratching at it. He couldn't communicate it. I give him.
Could be opioids as well.
It could be opioids as well, but he just had himself scratched to bits. Like he was raw. I tried to give him some cream to put on. I didn't want
I
to.
think people just have well, not all people, but a lot of people have a tendency of looking at homeless people, drug addicts, criminals, whatever, and just seeing the crime, the drug, the addiction. But there's trauma behind every story, and a story behind every trauma, you know, and nobody chooses to live that life without trying to cope with something at the very, very least, you know. Also a former addict myself, so fully sympathise with your situation.
But what I will say, there's two things. I know that I was carried, and the second thing, I'm very fortunate to have a loving family to care for me. Even though I had addiction issues, I never had to resort to crime to feed a habit. It wasn't like sometimes, you know, with heroin addicts, the insatiable craving, and then, it's different. The effects of taking any drug intravenously is magnified a million times, but the side effects are magnified a million times as well.
The takeaway here is you're now the healthy gut guru. So we're gonna keep on path here. I'm gonna ask you. 26 years ago, you started independently studying vaccines. What was it, first of all, that triggered that, and where has that led you?
What triggered it is my wife and I wanted to have a child.
Okay.
And I had always a little bit of doubts. Once I started training as a naturopath and I started reading about stuff, I think, well, why is there mercury in these? Why is there mercury in these vaccines? Do these vaccines actually work? Now, this was the time when we were at the beginning of the internet. You know, really, the World Wide Web was dial up on your phone. If you're lucky, you got through after about half an hour. You know, so we didn't have access to all this information that's currently available. Saying that, since COVID, obviously a lot of the really valuable and useful information has been taken off the search engines.
Well, certainly very, very layered.
Very difficult to find. All the stuff that I've read off before, studies I've read off before, and you go to look at them now and they're no longer there. So it was we wanted a healthy baby. We read as many books as we could at that time. I read 4 or 5 books about vaccination, all written by scientists and doctors that basically give credibility to the fact that infectious diseases did not decline in the world because of vaccines. Good nutrition, health, and hygiene. Like in 1968, when the measles...
Nothing's going to counter that.
Yeah, in 1968, when they rolled out the measles vaccine, world measles had declined 98%.
Okay.
Was it because of the massive measles? Oh, no, it wasn't.
It was already...
And anybody who got side effects or who didn't get vaccinated, who got side effects from the measles, a lot of it was due to vitamin A deficiency. Like a lot of us as children growing up, one of the things our parents always give us, cod liver oil, full of vitamin A, full of vitamin D, tasted vile. And even back when I was growing up, my mum was giving us a Halib orange,
there was
vitamin C.
To their madness.
You know, you go back to look at the things we done years ago, and then you see how sensible and clever they were, and all of that has been...
It's not from a tinfoil hat point of view, so it's not like it's healthy to look into stuff, to question things and
That's what science is for.
to look over the facts and look over the figures yourself. So 26 years ago, you started looking into that. And
yeah, so basically we read what these vaccines did, and then we read about the excipients. Now, most people, if you ask an average nurse, what are excipients? What are the excipients in vaccines? They look at you. Because the reason they put so many excipients in, A, they're in the stabilizers, but they're also to garner a very strong inflammatory and immune response. And the problem is that you end up with high levels of circulating antibodies, not necessarily high levels of memory T cells. So you've got B lymphocytes that make antibodies, you've got T lymphocytes, basically like CD4, CD8 killer cells that gobble up cancer cells. But when you artificially stimulate the immune system, you don't end up with a whole high level of T cells, memory T cells. You end up with a lot of memory B cells and a lot of circulating antibodies. These antibodies start binding to your tissue. What happens later on in life? Autoimmune diseases, cancers, absolutely.
So obviously the naturopathic way has dominated your life since 26 years ago. And then COVID hit, and that's when I first found out about you, because you were leading the COVID rallies, or at the very most speaking at most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I questioned it from day one myself, and felt like it was very much like communist training, or
it just didn't make any sense. First of all, two weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah, or
and then
the new normal. The minute they have a catchphrase laid up for something that every single station is saying on repeat, is a red flag straight away for me.
Act as if you've got it.
It was a very, very scary time to be alive. So 2020, COVID hit, your practices were shut down. Like yourself, like a lot of the rest of the world went remote and went online. And
yeah, so at that time I was running cardiovascular screening clinics through various pharmacies, both in the north and south.
Okay.
So that March I had a number of clinics set up to do, and that was fairly lucrative for me. And suddenly I had no work, I had no business, I had no access. No, alongside my cardiovascular testing and treatments, I was also doing gut health stuff at the same time. But I don't know, God inspiration, I don't know, but this is where the healthy gut period came into my mind, because I could start doing things on Zoom. And at that time, I was doing some functional gut testing. But in the last few years, I've started using technology called bioresonance testing, which basically with a DNA sample, I can scan the body and see what's going on. And then I can do my consultation. I send them a test kit, they send it back to me. I can test them and then go through the results over Zoom.
So like every person, the inner ball bag in me, wants to say, like, what's your credentials? Like, who am I, who are you to say these things, or where's your proof? Do you know what I mean? Or where do you get your...
It's whenever they say, oh, you must be a Google doctor. How do you think that we transfer so much information today? Like, if you want to access your research, you put in PubMed and whatever it is you want to, then usually that brings up the majority of the research articles.
People have a tendency of, due to maybe many decades of brainwashing, look upon naturopathic medicine as pseudoscience, where it's actually quite clearly the opposite. But that's based on the Rockefellers pushing petrochemical pharmaceuticals back in the early 1900s. But how do you settle a patient coming in who is, say, a boomer, for example, who believe everything they're told on the TV, and they're coming in going like, oh, I don't know, the doctor said I should take statins, and he's never told me anything about eating healthy or anything, but he said take these statins. So where do you start with that?
Well, I certainly try to educate them on about, things like statins, why we need cholesterol, how important it is in the body as a biological molecule, how like 36% of your total cholesterol is in your brain, how if the studies now show there's 44 studies showing that if you take a statin, for example, it only extends your life by 4 days.
Who wants that?
But the side effects are dementia, diabetes, heart disease, kidney failure, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on.
Nice segue into the jobs and the side effects. So we were getting told to go and get immunized against something that most people had a 99.98.7, whatever the fucking percentage was, survival rate of, to potentially give you immunity against the disease, or maybe not hospitalize you. How do we get to this point? Like, obviously you led the rallies, etc., against that, and spoke out against that, and were demonized and vilified and COVID or tinfoil hat wear. But now, since we've seen the spikes in myocarditis, we've seen the spikes in rare cancers, we've seen the spikes in autoimmune diseases. So, where's the apologies?
There aren't many apologies. Over 80% of my clients that I currently see have taken the vaccines. Some of them will have had prior symptoms through the vaccines. Many, it brought about new conditions that they didn't have prior to that. There's not one that I have asked, do you regret or do you not, or if you had the chance to do it again, would you take the job? Not a chance.
Right. Obviously, it's very much like, in a lot of cases, I told you so basis with people, you know.
Yeah, I think we need to have a little bit of hubris about it too, you know.
Depends who the person is.
If there's someone like some of these TV pundits that rammed it down our throat, who made us, who basically made us feel like the unclean. I was saying to my fiance, I said, we need to go out with wee bells just to warn that we're unvaccinated, you know. Unclean.
Well, I never wore a mask, or
we didn't wear a mask
in any of the nonsense that went on. Just because, like, naturally I have a natural defiance to being told what to do, but secondly, I don't really know how anybody looked at that situation and thought, like,
well, from my perspective, Mark, initially I was scared like everyone, because we're getting all this stuff coming from Italy and China and people collapsing. My son got sick at the same time. Now he's studying to do his A levels. My son's called Zan. X-A-N.
Yes,
which means defender of mankind, by the way. No pressure, son.
Not seen you. No offense.
No pressure, son. So he got sick at the time. Couldn't see a doctor. Where he lived in England, they couldn't get paracetamol, they couldn't get flour, they couldn't get toilet roll, couldn't get anything. So I had him on, I put him on high dose vitamin D with K2, magnesium, zinc, manuka honey, olive leaf extract, all the things I knew could give him immune support. His glands were up, his chest was really rattly, but after 5 days, he was better. And the reason he was better, because he was never vaccinated as a child. So he has it doesn't mean he doesn't get sick, he just has a very robust immune response that means he gets over sickness a lot quicker. And that is the way our immune system is meant to work.
Good question. What's your age? Sorry?
My age?
Yes.
I'm 60.
60, so fall in the bracket of the boomer age bracket, so.
Pardon?
So you fall in the sort of age bracket of
like
my parents, etc., who believed everything they were told. The fear was building up big time and ratcheted up the daily death counts, etc. And you can totally understand, you know, if that's your mindset, how people were led along the garden path. But it was scary times. So you were fine.
24/7 fear mongering, and in fact, I actually got on the Stephen Nolan show.
He's a friend of mine, actually. So
I believe. I hear he calls in here all the time for breakfast.
A scooter's parked out the front.
Is that the reinforced one?
The reinforced one out the front, yeah.
Is that the one that looks like a mini Humvee? Anyway, so there was was it that summer? Was it 2020 or 2021? I think it was 2020. And this is when they started all this lockdown going on, and you had to socially distance, blah, blah, blah. So I've been trying to get on to show and couldn't get on. So there had been this event happened in Dungannon. It was a Gaelic match. And Dungannon won this cup that they hadn't won for years. Everyone invaded the pitch.
Catholic football problems. The guy. Sorry, continue.
So anyway, they invaded the pitch, and Stephen was up shouting about this the next day, and I pretended I was one of the disgruntled listeners who thought this was horrible that they invaded, and I got on, I just unleashed, and I said, "How dare you spread all this fear porn about a bloody flu?" And then he started on, "And who are you?" Like you were saying. He said, "What's your qualification?" I said, "Well, I'm a qualified physio and a naturopath." "Oh, you're a naturopath." The condescending tone. And I didn't let up, and I just went on and on and on, and then he shut me off after 3 minutes. "Oh, you're one of those Google doctors. You're not a virologist."
All
Thank
doctors
God.
who we go to currently are Google doctors. You know, they put your symptoms in and they tell you you've got this. They never tell you go home and eat that, and this may lead to, you know, better bowel function, or go home and eat this.
When someone goes in and their blood pressure's up, the first thing you always have to ask them, because blood pressure is regulated by the adrenals and the kidneys, are you drinking enough water?
You were fined £430. Obviously, the sum is immaterial, but you were fined £430 for attending a COVID rally and speaking. I believe, yes.
So, what actually happened? First of all, I think maybe a number of months. My fiance and we met at the toilet roll aisle in Tesco's 3 weeks into lockdown, which is a COVID romance, but that's another story. Anyway, June was out at my house, and we got a knock on the door. I think it was a Thursday night, and opened the door, and the police were there. No, at that stage, we were out shouting about the clapping. And anyway, the guy, I went out and I said, "Oh, well, just to warn you, you shouldn't be attending the rallies," and sort of stuff like that. And then I started chatting with him, and he agreed with everything I was saying. "This is a load of bullshit. This is all made up." And he's on here shaking his head. Anyway, I thought that was the end of it. And then 2 weeks, I think it was September 2023, 2 weeks before I was due to move in with my fiance, got a knock on the door again, and police with 2 summons for me from 2 years previous. And in fact, the summons, if I had moved, the summons, because they've only got like 2 years to serve. If I had moved 2 weeks earlier, it would have been null and void. So I ended up going through a solicitor in Macrofeld, and he said, "Oh, you've got a good case." And they took me in, and I sat there, and I just thought, "You're not even trying to fight this for me." The judge had already decided. She looked at the pictures. I had a T-shirt on, because they had a video evidence of it, of me and hundreds of other people at this event.
Well, some say it's the injustice system, really, don't they? Like, and during those times, laws were enacted.
And there aren't even laws.
There were emergency edicts or whatever you want to call them. And
so anyway, when I'm in front of the judge, and the judge turns to the prosecuting barrister and says, "So what were we finding these COVID deniers, these people who are breaking the mandates back then?" And he said, "Oh, it was £50 a time." "Okay, well, Mr. McCollum, we're going to fine you £200 a time for breaking it." Not like Boris. Boris was partying the bit out, and
of course. One rule for you.
One rule for the rich, and not so much for the rest of us. Anyway, so I got fined £400 plus £30 fees or something. My barrister said, we could take it further, but they might fine you even more. And at that particular time, work and stuff maybe wasn't going as well. Financially, I wasn't in a really good position. And I decided not to. Now, that really knocked the wind out of my sails for months afterwards.
Did you say?
Because they said I would have a criminal record now for standing up, putting my head above the parapet, help share information to try and keep people healthy.
How can it ever be a crime in a so-called free society to regurgitate researched information to a group of people? Like, how can that be conceived a crime? And
because COVID was never about a disease and infection. COVID was all about, let's see what we can do to control people through fear, and that's what they did. And the idea of COVID was really just the Hegelian dialectic was the reason to introduce gene-altering technology, which is reaping serious damage now. Like, there's studies coming out now. If you've had two shots, you've reduced your life expectancy by 37%. And in Canada, the research shows, because there's a guy called Luc Montagnier who was actually a guy who discovered HIV/AIDS. He looked at the genomic sequencing of the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, and he says there's sequencing in here for HIV. And that sequencing is not just in the COVID virus, but actually in the shots as well. So actually in Canada, they reckon because the uptake in the vaccines was so high, because Canada, Australia, New Zealand are some of the most compliant. Amazing that these were countries that were colonized by prisoners, and yet they're now the most controlled states in the Commonwealth. And there was a very high uptake of vaccines in Canada. They reckon there's a guy called Dr. Byron Bridle from Canada. He reckons that 80% of people may have vaccine-associated immunodeficiencies, and basically they've got AIDS.
There has been a lot of mainstream morticians, etc., who have been reporting big abnormalities in bloods and finding different things in the bloods post-death.
Yep. Well, they found that 80%. There was a recent study. It's in a peer-reviewed journal. Dr. Peter McCollum was talking about it. I think they looked at 347 cadavers that they did autopsies on. 78% of those who died as a result of the COVID shots. Now, in terms of when we look at the figures worldwide, there's a guy who previously was quite high up in BlackRock, and he's one of these people that's into statistics and stuff. They conservatively estimate that 17 to 20 million people died worldwide due to the COVID shots. Now, if you actually go to countries, so per countries like Nigeria had a 1.4% uptake of vaccine, and they had some of the lowest deaths. Yeah. If you look at Kerala in India, I think it's Uttar Pradesh in India, who both use the hydroxychloroquine ivermectin protocols, along with sort of steroids and antibiotics. They had significantly low numbers. Very poor countries with poor health and hygiene and nutrition, but very low rates of deaths of COVID.
Plus, like the lack of autism in the Amish community that don't get vaccinated, isn't it?
Exactly. So here we are, and like last year, I think excess deaths in Northern Ireland was 18% above the 5-year average prior to COVID.
So,
and the Republic of Ireland, which has a very low age demographic and had no excess deaths during COVID, now are running at 18%. Some places down south, some of the counties are running as high. I can't remember which county it is. One of them's running like 42% excess death. Nobody's questioning it.
Well, plenty of people are, but they're not given a platform to question on. You know.
Yeah, well, we know that's all controlled. Everything's controlled. The state, BBC, RT.
What's the end? You know.
What's the end?
So obviously, the response from the medical establishment, the political establishment, the justice system has been pretty clear that they do not want dissenting voices speaking out or like proper information getting out there.
No.
So, like, why are these people working towards the clear destruction of supposedly their own people that they're representing? Clearly, they're not working for us, you know?
Well, that's the rabbit holes we've been down this last number of years. You know, and a lot of us are aware that there are elites that are running everything that we don't even know about. You know, above the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. People think Elon Musk is rich. You know, Rothschilds are conservatively estimated at 500 trillion, and there's people wealthier than them. And their idea is that they look at us lower people, useless eaters.
Yeah.
You know, it's mentioned many times, and they have a political wing, or the WEF, World Economic Forum, who has ran out this mandate called Event 2030, so basically where they want is central banking digitalized currency, digital passports, which will have all our data, like China, so they can control everything. They want 15-minute cities.
But now they have Republican Americans believing that Trump and Elon Musk, who wants to plant a chip in your brain, and Trump's pushing for Palantir to document everything biometrically. You know, like, come on, guys. Like,
yeah, I've had to rethink my whole thoughts of Trump recently.
I think a lot of people have.
I was hoping he'd be the great white hope, There's some things he's done that are obviously quite good, and I wish we could do them in the UK and Ireland. But I think he's controlled by the Zionists,
Of course
and
he is.
and they're just two of the same Democrats, Republicans. It's just like most of the political parties here in the UK and Northern Ireland. It's the illusion that we have the ability to put these people in power when they are nothing but mere puppets controlled by higher powers. And what is their agenda? Well, if you actually go back to 2012, you have the Rockefeller paper on lockstep. Wonderful how they use lockstep all the time. We need to get this. Let's build back better. Yeah. You've got 60, 70 media channels, and they're saying the same thing, and every one of them. And you say
to the word.
To the word.
Yeah.
The narrative's already been written. So I think for me, it's the TED talk in 2015 that Bill Gates gave. What's the greatest threat to this planet? Well, we're heading for a population between 7 to 8 million. They actually said that if you took if you actually took all the people in the world, you could put them in one state and still give them 100 meters to grow their food on.
Yeah, there's 100 acres. Everybody in the Texas, 100 acres.
Exactly. So his talk said the greatest threat to the world is too many humans, but we will sort that out with a really good female reproductive program and a really good vaccination program. So for anybody out there who doesn't understand, I thought vaccines were meant to save lives, not take life.
Isn't it amazing how the inventor of Windows 95 is the guru for World Health?
And then we move fast forward to event 201 in September.
John Hopkins.
Yeah, September 2019. John Hopkins and the Bill and Melinda Gates, where they just coincidentally run a simulation of a worldwide coronavirus pandemic. At the same time, Bill Gates invests 50 million in vaccines, for which he made a 10 times return. So, and when this whole thing started, and they started talking about,
one of those tinfoil hat ones,
aren't you? No, I haven't got my hat with me today. Somebody nicked me hat with tinfoil on it. I had a really lovely little beanie. So anyway, so event 201, simulation. He invests all this money in vaccines before we even know about this coronavirus thing coming out. At the peak, whenever they were really pushing the vaccines and the price of Pfizer topped off, that's when he chipped in his shares. Chipped out his shares. And then when the price started dropping, he said, it looks as if this virus wasn't as dangerous as we thought. Oh, it looks as if this vaccine wasn't as effective as we thought. Mm-hmm.
And Anthony Fauci was heavily involved funding-wise in the Wuhan lab that has potentially leaked the virus.
So it's even worse than that. So you have DARPA, which is the research wing of the American Department of Defense, who was funding the NIH at the University of Virginia. I think it was North Carolina. I think it was. At that time, Barack Obama brought in this law that you couldn't do a thing called gain of function research. You couldn't take a virus and make it more dangerous. Yeah. So what they did was they did the initial research. They have their initial patents with DARPA. Then they outsourced it from the NIH supposedly to Wuhan. And then, of course, when Wuhan happened, the epicenter of all this, next thing it was, it's because of a bat and a pangolin having a bit of nookie or something. There's been something weird going on.
Now, they had the patent for the COVID vaccine in 2016, I believe.
Mm-hmm. The DARPA and American Department of Defense actually share patents with Moderna. Okay. For theirs. If you actually look at the CDC and the FDA, how many patents they have for nearly all the other childhood vaccines.
So how is that?
Always follow the money. If you want to find out what's behind anything or everything, follow the money.
True. Now, mainstream media are even admitting now about the vaccine damage, etc. So how are companies like the FDA still saying, "I'll get your booster shot, it's safe and effective"? Like how?
Because big pharma, CDC, FDA, they're all run by the same Zionists with the same agenda. 0.02% of the population that controls. And I, prior to this last sort of 6 months before being a Protestant, I probably would have aligned myself with Israel. I've learned an awful lot this last 6 months. A lot of stuff that I think has been exposed and will be continued exposed. This isn't there to talk about it because we might get shut down because we'll be seen as being anti-Semitic. But if you look who heads up BlackRock, State Farm, Vanguard, CDC, FDA, NIH.
Anti-Semitic to notice a pattern.
It's all run by scientists who all have dual citizenship.
So where do your loyalties lie, really, at that point? Look,
so
obviously these issues are at play, and those are the exact fucking buzzwords that are going to make people go,
yeah.
They're not talking about science, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact remains that there's people out there now who have autoimmune deficiencies, who have got cancers, who have had myocarditis, who have had many things off the back of the so-called immune shots.
Yep.
And there's nothing really out there to help them mainstream-wise. So what are you doing? Can you just explain what?
Well, I think one of the big problems is there's still not a very high level of acceptance within the NHS that these jabs are responsible for causing these conditions. The old saying that coincidence doesn't equal causality. But when something keeps slapping you in the face time and time again, how long before you realize that that's what's going on? They'll put it down to things, missed appointments. Terrible cancers in young people, 8,000% increase in mild pericarditis, cardiomyodystrophy, neurological disease. Like what I'm trying to help one of my clients at the moment whose mum has been diagnosed with a very serious autoimmune disease, and treatment she's getting is I'm working with others, like a friend of mine who at the beginning of COVID, Marcus, big 18 stone guy, he ran the first gym I trained in England. He got in touch with me with gut problems, which we sorted out, and then he wanted to go to Thailand because he has a house out there. He has a Thai wife, and I warned him at that stage that I was quite concerned about the jobs. He said, "Well, we can't go to Thailand if we go get them." So anyway, he went there, and when he came back, he needed a spinal operation because of years of too much training, and he had collapsed disc and stuff. Within a week of having that, he had bilateral DVTs, clots in both his calves. Now at that stage, he reached out to me and said, "David, I think this is," and I said, "I think it is." And then he ended up having to go in for some work on his heart. So then they had him on all anticoagulants. And then when he was in Thailand, he started to develop a lot of problems with his breathing. Like he had some sleep apnea, a little bit of sleep apnea because he's a big guy to begin with. But it was his O2 levels were dropping down to like 65, 70% at night. And one of the things that's very common amongst a lot of the vaccine damaged is sleep apnea. Okay. So he was then diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, what is called myasthenia gravis, which basically interferes with the neurotransmitters called acetylcholine that's released between different nerve endings. So there was a lot of work. Well, pain, and a lot of it's just because you lose all your muscle strength. Yeah. Your muscles get weak because there's no
disintegration, basically.
Yeah. So he went to see the top specialists there, and they diagnosed this. Then he went to see a consultant in London, and who looked at all this. And this particular consultant had a specialty in neurology or something. He said, "No, that's just neurology." He said, "Look, read this." And he just got so angry, and he said he didn't want to know. He just didn't want to know that he has this. Now, at that time, I said to him, because there's a guy called Dr. Brian Ardis, who's a naturopath chiropractor, who's done a lot of research. He actually discovered a number of papers. One of the papers was that whenever they looked to find out the origin of the COVID, that they couldn't find any bat DNA, but they found two types of snake venom. Chinese crate snake, Chinese king cobra. Now, when you're bitten by a snake, the first thing the venom does is stops your blood clotting normally. What was the first serious side effects that were noted from taking the vaccines within AstraZeneca? Vaccine-induced thrombocytic thrombopenia, which is what you would get if you're bitten by a snake. Second thing that the snake poison does, it attacks your nervous system. So it stops your breathing. So snake venom attaches to part of the receptor sites called nicotinic cholinergic receptor sites. So China, very high population of smokers, were the most underrepresented group in hospital with COVID. because they're smoking their nicotine blocked the snake poison. And now this is one of the treatments they're actually giving people. They're actually getting to use nicotine patches to actually block the snake venom. Now, there's a lot of other things that need to be done as well. And I've one of my particular clients who took the shot because she had asthma, and then she had a number of times where she was actually going blue. And her husband reached out to me, and I put on a detox for the spike proteins, and I put her nicotine.
As mad as it is, obviously there's still a debate out there whether the vaccines were a good thing or a bad thing. And there may be people out there who still think they were a good thing and we're two handicaps. But leaving that aside, putting that to one side, as a naturopath, a lot of people are now coming to you with what appear to be vaccine damage illnesses such as myocarditis, cardiovascular illnesses, cancer, autoimmune diseases, autoimmune through the roof. So, for the people out there, what is there available from a natural standpoint without going to the pharmaceutical companies?
Okay, so myself and a lot of like nutritional naturopathic consultants would use technology called bioresonance testing. And it's based on the theory that everything is energy and vibration. So with a DNA sample, you can put it in the headset and it basically picks up frequencies of different pathologies, microorganisms and stuff. So you can scan with a blood sample or DNA sample. I can scan somebody's body, in 10 minutes, and I can see where they're having problems in terms of inflammation, in terms of low energy within the organs. That the lower the energy, the less it's going to function. And I can almost invariably tell, even if somebody didn't tell me, when I look at it, I can look at it, and it invariably looks like I can say, yeah, you've been vaccinated. Now, I had one lady come to me recently who wasn't vaccinated, and she's a personal trainer. And the last few years, she's been struggling. Just her mojo's gone, her energy's gone, blah, blah. I screened her and I said, to anybody else, I said, when I compare your results to some of my vaccinated patients, yours looks as bad, if not worse. She's not vaccinated. I said, by any chance, I said, do you have any power lines near you? She says, there's a big fucking one sitting in my backyard, and they've been working on it for the last 2 years. It's always buzzing and vibrating. I says, can you keep any plants in the house? She says, no, they all die. I said, you need to get an EMF meter. She hasn't got one yet. I said, you need to get an EMF meter and go out to that. So you see the amount of radiation that's given off from that. So we actually have an EMF meter. So we go around the house testing different things. We have a BT mast about 200 meters from us. And we go out and take it up the BT mast. Oh my, from about 50 yards out, it's going radio frequencies and EMFs, non-ionizing radiation.
Is there hope? Is there a coming back from these illnesses that are picked up as a side effect from the
Well, certainly I've been helping a lot of patients. We don't know long term because we're still only into the first couple of years. So we don't know the long-term prognosis. As I say, my focus is really trying to build the body, build the immune system up, support the gut. Like one of the most important things is your first line of defense against infection is your gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So 70% of your immune system's in your gut. And one of the species of bacteria that's really important to keep you healthy is called bifidobacteria that are significantly killed off from the COVID shot. So you need to replenish the bifidobacteria. One of the things that you can actually take that will help it is taking vitamin C as a supplement. That's been shown to rapidly increase.
It's finding the right supplement, though, isn't it? The supplement provider, because
a big problem is as well.
It's watered down shite.
Well, no, vitamin C is relatively cheap and inexpensive. The problem we have is most of our vitamin C is sourced from China. So it could be contaminated with heavy metals like lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium, things like that. So it is difficult. What I will say to people, supplements, even if you are healthy today, even if you eat a healthy diet, you probably still need to supplement your diet because the nutrients aren't in the soil. If they're not in the soil, they're not in the food. So you have to counter that. Lack of nutrition because we don't have it in our food anymore. Yeah. Second thing you need to counter is the fact that we eat so much processed food today.
It's all very clearly by design, isn't it?
It's all clearly by design. And it's interesting as well, like my fiance and I would both be quite sensitive to gluten. Okay, so about 30% of the population has non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Yet if we go to the continent and we eat gluten on the continent, we don't have any problems.
It's like an enzyme or like a protein in the...
So what they do here in the UK is they spray all of our cereals with Roundup glyphosate. It was a weed killer. So when Monsanto patented it, they patented it as a weed killer, but they also patented it as a antibiotic. Yeah. But it's an antibiotic that kills the good bacteria.
All the bodies.
Yeah. So they spray it with glyphosate. They spray it with another chemical called atrazine, and atrazine is linked to testicular cancer and infertility issues.
Turn the frogs gay, David.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Well, fans should be all right then, won't they? And the third thing that they actually spread with is synthetic folic acid.
Yeah.
Now, we have receptor sites for folic acid in our body, but it's a form called methyl tetrahydrofolate, not synthetic folic acid. So when you take synthetic folic acid, it's a gut irritant, but it also blocks the bioavailable active sites for methyl tetrahydrofolate. And in fact, there's a genetic condition called MTHFR polymorphism. Basically, it's a genetic sort of, not a defect, there's different people. So some people are what we call undermethylators. Over 50% of people are undermethylators. And methylation plays a massive role in controlling inflammation, breaking down neurotransmitters, breaking down hormones, etc. Now, I was asking you earlier about, because it's also linked to breaking down a compound called, have you ever heard of homocysteine?
No.
Homocysteine is an inflammatory compound that's produced by the metabolism of methionine. But you need to be able to methylate homocysteine to break it down into what's called S-adenosyl methionine, okay? And if you're an undermethylator and you don't do this, elevated homocysteine is linked to increased inflammation in the arteries. In fact, a homocysteine test, if you want to go and get a blood test, that would be more significant prognostic indicator of whether you're going to get cardiovascular disease. Homocysteine is what you should be measuring. Do we measure it in the NHS? No, because we're still measuring cholesterol. We're still fixated with this idea about cholesterol. And the thing is, they've actually studies show, well, if you're over 65 and your levels of bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol are elevated, you live longer.
Well, it seems like the whole food pyramid, everything was upside down anyway. But look, obviously a lot of perceived doom and gloom here. We've been speaking about during COVID, you met your fiancée. Yeah. So tell us a bit about June and how you met them.
So 3 weeks into lockdown, I was at Tesco's. I was walking along. I came to the toilet roll aisle. June was coming the other way. We stood and looked at each other and laughed because you could get toilet roll. Then we got talking. It turned out she lived in the same village. We went to the same school. I knew her brother, who's a postman.
Okay.
So I had put together a report, 15 foods and supplements you can take to stay healthy during COVID, that I was giving to people for free. Some people I charged £10 to give it to charity, whatever. So I sent her an email with this on it, okay? And I fancied her, but I didn't want to come across too forthcoming. So anyway, 2 weeks later, I'm back in Tesco's again. Looked over, she's paying for her food, and I thought, God's trying to tell me something. So waited outside, chatted her up. Next week we went on a date. We've been together ever since. And she's my other tinfoil hat wearer.
Everything's a partner.
Oh, if we hadn't met, I don't know how I would have got through this class.
Have you accepted for?
Nah, we'll both be married before, and we're not really that bothered. We're engaged. We've been engaged for 4 years.
I am married. It was a beautiful day, but yeah.
Well, I've been through that before, and I don't know if I want to go to the expense of that again, but
obviously.
So that's how we met, and then obviously at that time, June was actually, because this was early into the COVID thing, she was actually for free. She was making masks for elderly people in the village, because at that time we didn't really know how harmful masks were. Funniest thing is when I did my first talk up in Derry, Stroke City, whatever.
Silent
London. And Dr. Anne McCluskey, amazing GP, stood up and spoke out. Yeah. Anne and I spoke at that forum in the Guildhall that time, and she says, using a paper or cloth mask is as useful as using an electric fence to keep out mosquitoes.
Well, look at the way they were used. You walked into a restaurant, put it on, took it off the table.
Word on your wrist, word around your chin.
On to go to the toilet and then took, come on guys, what
disposable mask that should have been got rid of after 3 or 4 hours. And it's actually funny because our good old friend Fauci at the beginning was totally anti-mask when he said the majority of people who died during the 1918 pandemic, measles pandemic, died from pneumonia from contaminated dirty masks. So he went from that, oh, masks aren't useful, till, oh no, you need the mask. Oh, actually, you need to wear 3 now.
I wonder is there a chance he was profiting from masks at the point that he
Well,
came?
he profited from a lot of things, but hopefully, maybe, we'll see. I think that's one of the disappointing things we talked about Trump, is that all this talk about what's going to happen, Epstein list, blah, blah. Look at the P. Diddy thing.
I've got to the point in life, though, David, where
Shakespeare
how
said
can
it
you
best.
possibly be putting faith in anybody that's being presented to you as a potential leader or a potential option out of the so-called charade that we're living in? Because it's all controlled. Even the opposition is controlled. You know,
You should have reformed UK.
You know, the art of war was not lying. You know, be your own enemy. You know, during the Troubles over here, the British government pretty much ran the IRA. They were doing the attacks against themselves. It was.
And people are still ignorant to the fact that this has went on, that it's always been about divide and conquer. When we're busy fighting amongst ourselves.
And we've never been as divided as now,
No.
you know, and that's the thing, and that's, you know, look at the whole thing that's happening up in Ballymena due to the mass migration, etc. Making out about people that are racist, etc. This is planned. This is very much been.
Well, you look at the areas that they have planted these people in.
Socioeconomically deprived areas for a start.
Absolutely.
And it's instantly changing the demographic of the place overnight.
You know, in the 70s, people were growing up in these wee streets in Belfast, and everybody knew everybody. Like, even where we live in our village, we know a few neighbours to say hello to. And I grew up in this village.
That's dead, though. That's dead. You know,
because they wanted to do that. They wanted to get rid of the nuclear family. They wanted to get rid of community spirit. They want to get rid of Christianity.
Demoralization.
The Kalergi plan. You know, everything connects to everything. We haven't got a big enough wall with enough strands and connections to put onto, because it's so much. And that's why people think we're nuts. But the thing is, they have spelled out to us exactly what they want to do. Because that's part of the satanic agenda. They have to let you know. And if you go with it, you've accepted it. That's your problem.
The pre-programming through movies and through.
Oh, I know. I didn't realise how bad it was until the whole thing of COVID started.
Like, I mean, even we're talking about Trump. If you look at Back to the Future too, I think it was where Biff became owned the.
Yes.
Like, that was Donald Trump, basically. If you look back on it now.
Yeah.
But obviously, a lot of this is conjecture as connecting the dots, but the dots are there to be connected.
Yeah.
And quite clearly there is a spider web out there that is trying to control things, and not to the benefit of you or I or those out there, and yet they are laughing because we all play their game of division. You know, the trans attack me, I attack them, the fucking pigs attack the prods, the Huns attack the pigs, you know. It's just a joke, guys. Why can't we understand that we have got more in common than we do?
I know.
Than we do that there are differences.
With some of these faiths that will never integrate into our communities, who are taught to hate every other religion. So either you convert to their religion, or you pay Jasir, you pay the tax.
Well, then the Talmud, we are goyim.
Exactly.
We're basically animals, you know.
Yeah.
So how you know, that makes no sense.
It's funny, when I lived in Spain, the Spanish used to call us Gearies, foreigners, and Keries or something they used to call us.
But as Muhammad Ali, I believe, said on the Parkinson show back in the 70s, it's not racist to want to be with your own people. You know, the blackbirds want to fly with the blackbirds, the bluebirds want to fly with the bluebirds, etc., etc. And he led it on to saying, you know, no woman going to satisfy me like a black woman. And that's true. That's not a racist statement. And you may fall, like, a white person may fall in love with a black person and vice versa, and there's nothing wrong with it. And, you know, that's fine. But, you know, generally speaking, we do get along better with our own people. I'm not saying that you dislike other people because of that statement. Like, you get on better with your people who are like-minded. You know, nothing else.
The thing is, we only have a handful of friends that are like-minded, so we keep our friend group is very small, because the only people we can be ourselves with, without people looking as if, you know, you've got two horns going. Because
that includes family.
I know, I know, I know.
That includes family very much. Yeah.
It's created a lot of dissonance within my family. But I've always been, I'm a middle child. I'm a Wednesday child. I questioned everything since I was 2 years of age. I would have argued a black crow was white just because I needed to see evidence.
But I was exactly the same, David. And what I used to think and believe because I was told, oh, you're just this, you're just that. It's it's both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness because you need to know you need to be your own mediator. You need to know when you're questioning too much and when to read your neck in. You know what I mean?
And I also think, like anybody who researches things, you also have to be able to research, look at the evidence, and then make changes to how you think because of the latest thing that you've seen. Like my thought,
be willing to adjust your point of view.
absolutely.
And not live in an echo chamber.
Yeah, like this whole thing we keep going on about, or do we live in a flat Earth? Do we live in a globe? The more stuff I research, the more that I question. The only reason we think we live on a globe is because NASA, the Jewish for to deceive or beguile organization, showed us a big picture. Like they told us they went to the moon, so somehow they went through the in a shuttle that was made from tinfoil, gold tinfoil.
They can't do it anymore, but because
they've lost everything.
Destroyed the technology.
They had all the technology 60 years ago, but they've lost it all. Oh, there we're back.
So we're back. But,
so I think you have to be willing to research and willing to question and willing to challenge yourself that maybe the beliefs that you have aren't the same beliefs that you used to have. You have to, whereas some people are just so conditioned to keep believing.
Well, even if you don't get into the nitty-gritty details of the moon landing, for example, President Nixon was able to make a landline telephone call to the moon.
How did they get the cameraman there before Neil Armstrong?
Reception in Collingwood Forest Park in 2025, folks, to phone the Ma to let her know I'm sweet. But President Nixon could phone the moon to speak to Neil Armstrong and now Big Buzz Aldrin and just to see what the crack was. Like, I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be information out to prove this wrong, but I doubt very much that.
Was it the one where they interviewed Buzz Aldrin and he said, well, what was the worst part about the journey? He says,
oh, we
didn't actually go.
that would be a pretty bad part of any journey, not starting it whatsoever.
But and then you see all these other, like the space shuttle where all the astronauts were blown up in the shuttle.
Challenger,
and the Challenger, and then you see the astronauts, and then you see these. Yes, they all have exact doppelgangers.
Yeah, professor. Yeah.
Law professors and professors at these universities.
But as Bill Hicks said, it's okay. Go back to sleep, America. Here's 8 episodes of American Gladiator. Like that. We're living in the pleasure dome and distracted.
Bread, they did it in the Roman days. Bread and circuses. They're doing it again. And that's why we've got Prime, Netflix, now Apple TV, Disney.
Like sex on.
Oh, and who owns OnlyFans and Pornhub? The Dance.
Certainly not, David. Certainly not. But like, it's fun, to talk about these things because it almost feels like you're talking about things that other people don't know about, and it is actually the case. Or whenever certainly try to expose people to things that got you that you've got 2 heads and are smoking crack, which I have tried and wouldn't recommend.
So, Mark, like I always said to people, like 2 things you need to do. You don't have to believe me, but go and do your own research. Second thing I said, and always follow the money. Because when you follow the money, you'll see who's driving the narrative and what that narrative is. The fact that they've brought in now in the UK, I don't know if it's happened here, the full-term abortion, which I think is absolutely horrendous. Do you know about that being passed?
100%.
Yeah. What is the euthanasia thing? The
right to die bill.
Yeah, the right to die bill. Like in Canada. Yeah, in Canada, they're actually now bringing in laws that if you have a child that's got mental illness, that they can forcibly euthanize that child. Since they introduced euthanasia in Canada, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there's over 50,000.
Well, let's blame those poor children in Asia. Blame them poor children in Asia. What did they ever do?
To say that over 50,000 people have been euthanized in Canada. So they want to stop us having children. Like even when you look at things like
all these things are brought in on a percentile. So, you know, like for example, abortion. What if somebody got raped? Would you want them to have a child? Obviously, nobody's going to agree with that. If they want to, you know,
I think there always has to be caveats to anything. There can't be. It's a grey area. It's not pure. Nothing's enough, and I agree with you on
that. If we can't like sit here as human beings and fight for fellow human beings that are yet to be born, that have been proven to have a heartbeat from very early on, and are not just a cluster of cells, then where have we got to? Like,
yeah, and it's also my fear as well is where we're going. We talked about Neuralink. That's scary. You know, that's AI, that's Terminator, that's scary shit. But it's also the fact that they're bringing in more genetically modifying drugs. Like when you actually, there's a Dr. Lee Merritt who was an orthopedic surgeon in the American Navy, who then started talking about that if you take the damaged tissue out of an MS patient, it isn't what we thought it was. It's actually parasitic that's causing MS.
right.
It's parasites that's causing Parkinson's disease. It's parasites that are responsible for a lot of the cancers that we see.
Just went in from ivermectin.
This is where, you know, I think we personally used ivermectin prophylactically to stop us getting sick. We're the only ones in my family over 5 years who didn't get the flu, didn't get any COVID illnesses, because we were taking like maybe once a week or once every other week, we were taking ivermectin. And obviously now that we know that there's a big link between using ivermectin, fenbendazole, other antiparasitics as immune modulators for treating cancer and autoimmune diseases. But so whenever Lee Merritt, she was working with some other microbiologists or whatever, they discovered that there's actually no mRNA in these shots. But what they did discover in the shots was significant bacterial DNA contamination. So when you have DNA going into the human body that's foreign, your body starts to attack it. You know, so for example, if you went for a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, they put you on anti-rejection drugs because your own body's DNA is different from the DNA of that particular organ that's implanted. So if we have foreign DNA, and there's foreign DNA in every vaccine, including childhood vaccines, why do you think we have so many kids today that have eczema, blue ear, you know, problems with adenoids, etc., etc.? You know, the parents have been discouraged from breastfeeding. C-sections in the last 40 years have gone up from 4.5% to about 35%. Now, when you deliver an intact placenta through C-section, that's worth 50,000 quid for stem cells.
Yeah.
Whenever a baby is born, the cord's meant to remain attached for at least an hour to allow oxygen and stem cells and other immune boosters to snip it off, because they want that cord as quickly as possible because they can get the stem cell. It's like this thing now where you have to actually opt out of being an organ donor. I've actually done 3 times just to make sure, because I do not trust what's going to be done. You know, if I thought it was going to a viable donor, blah blah, but I don't. I think it'll all be sold off. We now know. They've integrated the software from America into the NHS in Northern Ireland, American software. I don't know if that's linked with Palantir or whatever, but certainly they're going to be, and there's an aspect of that where they're going to start charging people. Well, the thing is, when you give away something for free, people don't appreciate it.
You charge it.
You know, I think it's like when I in the past where I have given lots of time and information for free, I don't get, you know, you get taken for granted. And I think there needs to be some way that people, like if you're in the Netherlands, everybody pays. But if you are, you know, seen to be allowed, you can claim all your money back. You know, and that's the way it should be. You know, when I worked in the NHS and outpatients, and this is going back early 1980, 1989, you know, 25-30% of people didn't even turn up for the appointments. And yet you'd have and at that time you maybe had a 2-month waiting list, whereas now you probably got
a system. We have a person who's on our street who on a bi-weekly basis goes through the process of phoning one of the suicide hotlines as a drinker, has the door put up the hall, has a police service out, has the ambulance out, and then has the whole street up. And this happens on a bi-weekly basis. You know, how much money is that wasting on it?
Well, and as well as that, obviously, because we have a massive influx of people from other countries who seem to get priority within our health service. You know, like you see in some of these places where you have hotels in England where they're actually bringing out a mobile medical service to do it. I mean, you can't, you know, you have to phone 4 weeks ahead to say you're going to be sick.
So would you not almost think that that is like intensity by design to almost bring upon civil dissent and
That's where we're heading.
an uprising so they can bring, you know, military to the streets?
Well, who's going to come to the streets? Is it going to be our military, or is it going to be these fighting age immigrants that are coming in? Like, there's already talk and chatter about weapons being smuggled into the country for these people to use. They're being based in places like RAF Manston, which was a big RAF base in Kent. So I lived in Kent, in Margate for 3 years, which was beside RAF Manston. That was one of the few places that could land Concorde and stuff. But yeah, but they're turning that into so are they actually training them? We don't know. But I have a feeling that that may be part of what's happening.
Well, obviously, these sorts of things are all doom and gloom, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, looking from the outside in, almost is how I view it. It's entertainment. You know what I mean? Let them do what they want to do, and obviously you're going to be a bystander and you're going to get caught up. Almost, but there's a power in knowing almost what's coming, you know. And
well, I think but what we need to do is stop putting our trust in man. Like we have a friend, Melissa. I'm sure you've probably seen Melissa. She would have been a lot of the talk about the financial side of things. That a lot of the should be on Facebook and Twitter a lot. She's very switched on about the financial side of things. And she said way back 4 or 5 years, she says, no one's coming to save you. You have to get ready to do it yourself. You know, so at this time, loads of people, oh, we want Trump. And I certainly wanted Trump and some positive changes when he first came in. And then I started to realize, you know what? He's just another puppet. And now people who were Trump supporters that are calling out maybe people like Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, not to say that she couldn't be a shill or an infiltrator. Who knows?
That's it. The thing is, what it boils down to is you have to rely on your own research, your own critical thought, and those people that you know that you can trust with your life. Because outside of that, it's all fucking smoke and mirrors. How do people get in touch with you, David, if they are looking advice, if they're looking treatment, if they're looking, you know, further information, anything that we've talked about today?
Well, okay, they can go on Facebook and find me under the Healthy Gut Guru. And then they can message me from there, or they can find me under my personal David McCollum, which is in Facebook, which I tend to use more than my Gut Guru thing, just because of the way it's set up. It's interesting that I put up a post last night about certain antiparasitic drugs that had great use. So somebody sent me a picture. Facebook had moved it lower because what did it say, that I was peddling some sort of drugs or something stupid anyway. And I just thought they're selling all this over Facebook because I'm sort of known. I think I got 30 Facebook fans over the last. Okay. I don't know how many of you had.
I am an absolute angel when it comes to social media, David.
That's what I was thinking.
I think it happens.
So they'll find me under David McCollum. They'll find me under the Healthy Gut Guru.
I'll link all your socials in the.
And I'm gonna leave some cards with you today as well.
Okay. Now, obviously, we've discussed that you specialise in cardiovascular treatment, etc. Moving forward, what you know. It has all been very difficult. So moving forward, let's finish on a positive note. What are your plans? What are you wanting to do in the next 3 to 5 years, David? What is it?
You know, I haven't really. I sort of take it a little bit one day at a time because the world is changing at such a rapid rate. My focus is really just on personal life with my fiance, my son, my close family. I love my family, which is very different, but I still love my mum and dad. My dad's 87, my mum's 84. You know. I have caused them a lot of strife and stress because they don't like me talking about things that they're not comfortable with, because they are that generation that listens to mainstream media and reads the Daily Mail. And everything I've pointed out to them has been true. You know, when my mum got cancer, my aunt got fibromyalgia and breast cancer. My uncle got two bleeds in the brain. It was my uncle got two bleeds in the brain. I said to Dad, "Now do you believe me that there's something there?" And he says, "I do, son. I won't take any more of those COVID jabs." It took three of them before he do that. Now, um,
Well, that's what
the thing is that it's massive out there, the amount of vaccine injured people there are. There's a lot of people who they're still trying to seek, you know, and it's good sometimes to go to the NHS maybe to get some sort of basic diagnosis. As a naturopath, we don't look at giving someone a diagnosis. We look at where the root cause of problems are coming from. You know, so we're always thinking back from if something goes wrong, why did it go wrong?
Yeah.
If something functions normally, this is the way it should perform. If it's not functioning properly, it won't function properly. So you have to go back to the basics. You know, if someone's and that's what unfortunately we don't have in the allopathic NHS. You know, we have a symptom treatment service. We don't have a national health service. We have a national sickness service that's focused at switching off the symptoms. Like when you're driving your car and the red lights massively come on the dash, you don't take it to your mechanic and say, switch off the lights because it's annoying me. Switch, you know, plug in the diagnostics. Oh, you need this. Exactly.
This thing here.
Yeah, and then that's what you do. You fix the problem. You don't cover over the problem. That's what I do. And I say to people, if you're not testing, you're guessing. Like a lot of people say, oh, I want to do this here. And I said, well, first of all, we need to see if your body can cope with it. We need to see, you know, if someone does do any sort of cleanse, whether it's an anti-parasitic, antifungal cleanse, whatever, their body has to be in a situation that its organs for detoxification can work. If you don't do that and you do start a cleanse, then you start poisoning the body with more poisons, which like a blocked toilet can't escape, and it builds up and it builds up. So when I see, you know, quite often things being advertised on Facebook, oh, this will cure all your symptoms. There is no cure-alls and be-alls. Like, and people need to understand there's no magic bullet out there. Everybody's different, and you need to see where your weaknesses in your body are, support those weaknesses and support those organs that are detoxifying in order to detoxify. First of all, you know, if you go start straight in on a cleanse, you will make people so sick.
Yeah, I just introduced them to such nutrients straight away. It's like, would you say going forward, obviously you plan for the best, but certainly prepare for the worst.
Yeah, as best you can, but you know, we're facing, you know, like even look at mortgage rates, for example. Like at the beginning of, you know, start of COVID, my fiance's mortgage, I think, was £330. And then the interest rate started going up because we had to pay for all this money that was printed to pay all the people in furlough who were probably a lot of them were still working anyway, but just getting free money handed to them. So that's devalued currency, so it's worth less and less. But can't even remember where I was going with that. Yeah, so it's getting more and more difficult because financially, like every time you go into the supermarket, and you yourself would know because just you buying raw materials, people go, oh, how can you charge them? Well, you know, the price of eggs has gone up, the price of sausages, the price of my bacon, my rent, my rates, my staffing, yeah, everything goes up, except the value of money has devalued because they printed so much fiat money. You know, and
that's a whole other episode.
Well, we're heading, I think, because they're trying to bring in the European Central Bank and digital currency in October, there's going to be a massive crash in the market because that's the only way they're going to be able to try and get people dragged into it. And I don't know if you've seen in California, like if you have a Bitcoin account and you haven't accessed it for 3 years, they'll take your money. They'll take your Bitcoins. So it was funny, once they put that up there was a account lying dormant in California with 8.6 billion Bitcoin, and as soon as they announced that, the account was empty.
Well, you would actually still. Yeah, obviously these systems as well, like the blockchain, you know, sold to us as taking us outside the system is just be bringing us further into a system.
Yeah, you see, for me, I think if you have physical,
you can't argue physical,
silver or gold. Yeah, you know, whatever money I had, I turned, and like gold's up 50%.
I think the best thing you said is when I asked you hopes for the future is family, because you can't rely outside that. You know what I mean? Your loved ones, your friends, and as long as you know, concentrate on you being happy, them being happy, and surviving.
It is more challenging when your viewpoints and your research is so different to what they're conditioned to. They want to have a conversation about the very superficial stuff,
Of course.
and we have conversations about superficial, stupid stuff as well. But they don't want to face the stuff. Like the amount of times I've pointed out to my father, I said about chemtrails, and he said, "No, it's just no." I said, "Dad."
But to the flip side of that, what is a man of 80? What
87.
does he need to know about fucking chemtrails for? Just stand and chill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Maybe it's just me venting too
I
much.
do exactly the same with my
And I
dad.
can't help it.
I do exactly the same with my dad, but what
But
really
there are some 80-year-olds out there who
are switched on.
are switched on, who are very astute to what's going on. But most of them don't read what's mainstream media, read the mainstream papers.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on today, David.
It's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks,
And
buddy.
I'm sure it'll not be the last podcast we have, and thank you everybody for joining us live.
Thank you.
And you can get us on belfast-peace.co.uk for the podcast and t-shirts, and David McCollum on Facebook and the Healthy Gut Guru. Thank you very much.
Yeah! Shout out to Belfast Breakfast Babs.